one of the things that I feel like I can provide as a service as an occupational therapist to my community partners is a very neutral audit. And for the longest time, we would just do a walkthrough. When I say we, I usually have a student with me, but I would have all this stuff, loaded on my phone. I would have decibel readers. I would, I would tell if I could see some like gallery attendants or something, I would go over and say, just ignore me. I'm just trying to figure out how loud it is in here for kids with autism. And then they will say things like, oh, well, you need to know blah, blah, blah. And boy, at noon when the lunchtime crowd rolls in, and so that's kind of helpful. But what I try to gather are statistics on traffic, like when they're busy, when they're not busy, and if they have any observations about like natural bottlenecks that occur. And also, if you want to say bottlenecks, then escape hatches too. Like, although this is from a parent, but she said, yeah, you know why that area is really quiet over there? And I'll say, no, but it's so sensory friendly. And she'll go, yeah, it's really boring too. And I'll go, okay, well, thank you. And so that's why it's really helpful, because I am just like really locked onto that. But I will even get, I'll even download a zone meter on my phone if there's a lot of strong light and dark contrast. A lot of times that can backfire on us, and people don't stick around in those kind of galleries that have more ambient light. The ones with harsh light, I think, are harder on people. So we even will go so far as to figure out where are the bathroom smells coming from and where are the food smells coming from. And also, this is going to sound really random, but I learned this from being a school therapist for many years, that when the wind picks up and like leaves are blowing in the building, or there's a storm outside and you can hear it, when weather is a factor, it impacts what's going on inside of a building too. And so we'll keep an eye out for those things too. But I think the main thing is like, what's the logical path through the place that most people take? And then you look at the sensory factors associated. We try, if it's a Saturday morning event, we try to go on a Saturday morning, because we feel like, okay, this is as close as we can get to the same kind of lighting and maybe the crowding. But one thing that has consistently surprised me, because museums and zoos are such different places now, I still am having trouble getting used to how many millions of school kids are there on field trips. And so that's like a big crowding factor. And it's also really, families with kids with autism are there at the same time. It's really easy to lose those kids. And so I like to give families heads up, although that's not really part of a sensory audit, but that's like a practicality piece. So, Emily, I've done this with you, and Linda, I've done this with you. Just from your standpoint, what was the most helpful thing? And before you even answer that, we now have videos of these places too. And I think even if we could ever look at those together, to me, that would be like taking it to another level too. But for you guys, what's helpful?
I think that something that's been, enormously helpful for the DMA is the information that's come from your sensory audits, not just for the event we're hosting, but kind of just for any time visitors.
Yes.
So the information that we learn from you, much bigger, ramifications. So if we find out that, that people are getting fatigued at a certain point in the galleries, like that's a great place where we can put benches, just have benches there all the time, not just during our events. Or if we find out that there's a place that's really echoey and loud, then we can do, add in some doors or do some soundproofing in that area, which will make the space more comfortable, not just for our autism friendly event, but for, visitors anytime, knowing that, people with autism make up part of, a big part of our everyday visitation too. And we want it to be a good experience all the time.
Well, one of the greatest things about doing those sensory audits and thinking about those factors is there's not a single thing that we do to make an event more autism friendly or a venue that isn't helpful to everybody in general. And we've had plenty of people tell us that. that they like it. They're going to do the autism route or the sensory guides that we provide. They're like, oh yeah, I have sensory issues. And they're just walking along, watching us do things. So it's not intrusive. It doesn't impact other people's ability to enjoy the exhibits or the animals or anything like that. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, Linda, what were you going to
I was going
say?
to say just
Yeah,
that sensory friendly is really user friendly. It's a
it
universal.
is.
People love to engage in any
Mm-hmm.
environment in more than one dynamic. And just like
Mm-hmm.
Emily was talking about her space, we have Echo in a museum. Obviously, that was an eye opener for me to not, I knew about the Echo, but I didn't consider the water features and the sound of that. That would
Oh
be
yeah.
a natural draw to children, and awareness of the flight path of a commercial airline that goes over
Yeah.
every 7 minutes, our outdoor
Right.
space, our garden, just
Uh-huh.
that you were keyed into some things that we just kind of dismiss as ambient noises that could really impact somebody's visit. Yeah, those loud sounds, and then those areas with light issues, like you were talking about. All of those factors can really make a difference in somebody's
I
experience.
I learned something from the Dallas Museum of Art because I participated in one of Emily's Meaningful Moments events, which is a program for people with dementia, and just being involved in the museum, that with people of that age, that was another thing I was learning, and a lot of the surfaces in the museums have to be free of clutter and texture because artwork, Emily, tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm going to transport this sculpture over there, the rule is I transport onto a cart and then I push the cart over here and then I take it off. I'm not going to like carry the sculpture through the museum. And so what that means is the everything is bouncy sound. And secondly, there's a lot more ramps than maybe there would be in some places. Like the Dallas Museum has serious ramps. I mean, they're almost like the length of ski slopes, and so my concern for families with children in strollers, which a lot of people do show up at events with their kids with autism in a stroller so that the child won't run because you're right in the middle of downtown Dallas, and some of these kids are quite healthy, and so they zip them into these little strollers so that they won't take off. But you're pushing an 80-pound child up a really long ramp. And in my opinion, some of the families themselves are deconditioned because they stay inside with their child a lot. And
Mhm.
so just like when you were talking a moment ago about needing benches in different places, I felt like that was another reason that you would need benches is when you're trying to manage kids in a stroller who are really by most standards, too big to be in a stroller, but their parents don't want to put them in a wheelchair.
Mhm.
So, that's just a factor.
And
Yeah, I think
having that audit also helps to determining those happy spots or those hot spots.
Yes.
Helps us to develop our maps and our success stories in the space. I'm sorry, Emily, I didn't mean to
oh,
interrupt.
no, you're
Yeah.
no. I was just going to add to that that information that we learned from those audits. Our buildings team and our exhibitions team are always so happy to learn, from those experiences. And oftentimes the adaptations that we put in place are not expensive by any means,
Mm-mm.
like adding a little bit of a bench or a little bit of a seating area or something that, was very cost effective, that we found out was that the hand dryers in the bathrooms, that those were really
Yes.
bothersome to kids. And so
Yeah.
we just got some paper towels as an option too. And
Mhm.
so having a sensory audit, I think, is the first step, to making a welcoming experience. But that you can take the information that you learn from that, and it's not going to break the bank to make those changes.
Well, and one more thing. Um, I have been a volunteer in Emily's camps for kids with autism. And one of my jobs was to run the girls to the bathroom. And what I realized and I'm an experienced parent too, so I was like, okay, I can do this part. And so I would take these kids to the bathroom and they would go in there, and first they'd start by turning on the water, looking at their scabs, pulling out paper towels, and I'd say, well, do you need to go to the bathroom? And they'd be like, what? And I realized that they were using the bathroom as like a sensory break. And so I thought, oh, and so Emily, could you just talk for a brief moment about the ice fishing houses and how we learned about those from the art people in Montreal?
Sure,
It's not
yeah.
something we would think about as a Texan,
I
right?
know. I never in a million years thought that as a Texan that I would own an ice fishing tent. So we partnered with a museum, the Museum of Fine Arts in Montreal, to put on some autism programs. And when I went up there to see the event in action, their sensory de-escalation space was very simple. It was really just a pop-up ice fishing tent and some mats on the ground. You could go into the tent and make it quiet and dark in there, and just kind of de-escalate for a moment. And so as soon as I got back to Texas, I ordered one from Amazon, less than $100. And it's something that we set up now during our autism family events, our sensory days. So we also use it during summer camp, not just for kids, the summer camp that's for kids with autism, but we normally find out that by Wednesday afternoon or Thursday, the kids are looking for a sensory break sometimes. So we just have that as an option where kids can go in there, de-escalate for a few minutes, and then come back and have a really successful, remainder of their day.
That's great.
Sorry, Linda.
I was just going to
Go
say,
ahead.
I was just going to say, why don't we break for a moment and talk about sensory havens in our next recording.
You are right. Okay. Okay.